course. I just kind of wanted you to tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I was born in West Virginia many years ago, and my dad had been a prisoner of war in World War II, as a matter of fact. Can you see that?
Yeah. Put it up a little bit higher. Oh, wow.
Okay. All right. He's the guy. This is not. He's the real lanky guy on the right side of the photograph,
Okay.
with his leather hat up over his, up. He was shot down in World War II and spent 13 months in a prisoner of war camp. And so that was before I was born. He wasn't even married to my mother. So I'm kind of lucky to be here in so many ways. Anyway, he was recalled into the service when it switched over from the Army Air Corps to the United States Air Force. In 1951, I was 4 years old, so we left West Virginia and we moved out to California, where I lived in Carmichael. Do you know California at all? Are you
I live in California.
Okay, what part do you live in?
Monterey.
Oh my God, you live in a great place.
It's beautiful here.
Yeah, it is. I like the way the trees all slant away from the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I lived in California until 1959, and then my dad got transferred to Japan, and we lived in Japan for 3 years. Interesting that you should ask me that question about myself, because I'm in the process. You know Nick Whale.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know of him.
Yeah.
I don't know if you actually have been to England and met him.
No.
But anyway, he suggested I write my autobiography, so I'm in the process of doing that. I think he thinks I'm going to croak, so he wants to get it all down before I leave. Well, I've had some health issues, but I'm not going anywhere. Anyway, so because I was an Air Force brat, I lived a lot of places. And one of the places we lived, my dad was TDY to Montana at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Great Falls. And I was 8 years old, so it was 1955. And I just fell in love with Montana. The thing I remembered most about it was the fact that every place a person has been killed on a highway from a car wreck, there's a cross.
Oh.
I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, they still do that. So I made it back here when I was 63, so it took me a while to get back here. But in the meantime, I spent those years in Japan, which were fairly formative years, 11 to 14.
Okay.
And then I was in Utah, where I finished up my high school, most of it, surrounded by Mormon kids. And I enjoyed the Mormons. They always want you to join the church, but that's just not my thing. I mean, I'm a Christian, but I'm not a Mormon. So anyway, my dad had a heart attack on board a C-134 when I was a senior in high school. And so when he came back from Hickam, Hawaii, they moved us to Florida, because I think my parents were afraid I was going to marry one of the Mormon girls I was dating, and they didn't want that. So went to the University of Florida. The war in Vietnam was on, so you either stayed in sync with you either stayed 2S or you were 1A. You either got drafted or stayed in school. So I stayed in school pretty successfully, graduated from there in '69. The war was still going on. So I applied. I'd always been interested in becoming a chaplain or a minister, so I applied to Southern Methodist University and got in Perkins School of Theology there. And the rumor was they took women and children before they would draft divinity students. So that was just a joke. But I stayed there until I got a high lottery number. Then I went to Florida State and studied under Richard Rubenstein, a rabbi who wrote After Auschwitz, which was a book in which he said the Messiah had finally come to the Jewish nation, and it was the angel of death. He wasn't he wasn't real he wasn't a real happy guy, but it was an interesting book. He had a theory that he would ask. I was a student assistant for 2 years, and each of his classes he would ask, where did the soul of Adolf Hitler go when he died? And then we would study Jewish mysticism, the Hasidic tradition. And in the Hasidic tradition, they believe that the world began. I know you didn't ask me all this, but this is how
Oh,
I
it's
developed.
fascinating.
Everything was one. It was God, and when God created the world, it exploded. Right,
Mm.
the Big Bang theory. So that which was most like God went furthest from God. If you've been in a Jewish temple,
No.
they have a flame up front, and
Okay.
that flame represents the spark of God that's in each of us that goes back to God when we die. Right. So after studying the Hasidic tradition and that which was most like God went furthest from God because it's like poles of a magnet. His answer was the soul of Adolf Hitler went directly to the bosom of God. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to hear, but uh, I'm not God. I don't know how he thinks. I know 1,000 years is like a day to him, so it's only been 2 days since Jesus was crucified. So, imagine that if you can. Anyway, so I wrote a master's thesis on the nonverbal communication in Zen Buddhism, and I called it Zen on Sense or Zenonsense, and it was a lot of fun. I took my orals, I passed my language test, but my father died during that time. I never finished. I never turned in my thesis. Went down and watched him die in Miami-Dade Hospital, at Mercy Hospital there, and then I went to 5 different graduate schools. I went to SMU. I went to Florida State School of Religion. I went to Star King School for the Ministry, not to be confused with Sky King. But Star King was the minister in California who rode up and down the coast, convincing people not to enter the Civil War in 1861. And California was actually, as you probably know, a neutral state during that war. Well, he got pneumonia and died from that ride. But so I went there, and that was in the height of all the drugs. And oh my God, I saw somebody walking down the street. They were in such a hurry, they were snorting cocaine off a mirror as they were walking down the street. I mean, you have to be in a hurry to do that. I did a lot of ride-alongs with police officers because my life has been whenever I'm threatened by something, I try to get as close to it as I can. And the police scared me, so I thought I should get to know some policemen. And the police station in Berkeley had said, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you, which is an interesting way to think about that. But anyway, I didn't finish school there. And then when I was living in Dallas, I went back to Florida. My wife and I divorced. Well, she decided she was feminine since I was one. That wasn't going to work out. So I went to Texas because they were doing I started writing plays. I've been sober for 43 years and I've been writing for 43 years. I traded my addiction to alcohol for my addiction to writing. If I don't write every day, I get the Jonesing and feeling pretty bad. So I have to write every day. So that's how you stay protein and prolific. Anyway, while I was in Texas, I could tell you this really funny story, but I'll skip that. Anyway, I decided I would apply to the Yale School of Drama. And I thought, I worked at a restaurant that was attended by mostly gay men and gay women. It was called Lucky's. It was in Oaklawn, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas. And as you may or may not know, most gay people have a lot of disposable income because they don't have children, right? Unless they adopt them. Uh, so the tips were great. I enjoyed it anyway. Went to wash my car one night after attending I think it was a New Year's Eve party. I still wasn't drinking, but I noticed this homeless person around the trash cans at the end of the car wash, and I finally decided he was interested in those trash cans a lot more than he needed to be. So I went over there to see what he was looking at. Well, the price to apply to Yale was $50, and I was debating whether I wanted to spend $50 just to get turned down. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's expensive to apply.
Right.
So it's probably even more so now. But anyway, I went over there between these two trash cans in a bay where people wash their cars late at night. Everything's wet. There was a brand new $50 bill between the two trash cans, and it was dry. So I applied. 4 months later, April 1st, I was working at the restaurant, breakfast shift, and I got a call that I had a call from Yale, and I should come home and talk to this guy. So I called him back. He was Mylan Stitt. He was the head of the playwriting department at Yale. We talked for 2.5 hours. And then he said I was one of the 4 that were getting in that year into the playwriting. So everybody, including people that I'd asked to write me letters, they were all just like, "Oh, you're kidding me? You got in?" I'm like, "Yeah." And it wasn't easy. The first 2 weeks there, I thought I was going to have to leave because I just wasn't getting it. I thought freedom in writing was writing whatever you wanted to write, you know. But Mylan Stitt asked me I called him and told him I might leave, and he said, "No, let's go to this Mexican restaurant. I want to talk to you." So we spent 4 hours at this Mexican restaurant. Obviously, we didn't eat the whole time, but he explained to me about to be truly free, you have to draw boundaries around what you're doing. There has to be a structure. And then to be free, you break from the structure and then break back into it once you've done your little jaunt into freedom. So I finally got that, and I stayed. And when I left 3 years later, I got the ASCAP Cole Porter Prize for Excellence in Writing. And I had a great time there. I met so many people. You know, Liev Schreiber, do you ever hear of his name? You see him on films and Netflix all the time. He was in my first play at Yale. And the woman that was with him thought she was the next Meryl Streep. So in rehearsal, she spit on this guy. Well, nobody's heard of Martha Little. I mean, Martha, that's not her name. Martha, I can't remember her last name. That's Burley. Anyway, but Liev went on to be pretty famous, and he made a lot of money. Anyway, I've been just writing ever since then. I had anyway. I just keep writing, and it gives me a lot of meaning in my life. And I'm a Christian, and I went to another graduate school. The 5th graduate school after that was Texas Christian University Bright School of Divinity, and I got my Master's of Divinity there, and I served Christian church for about 12 years, and then I decided it just wasn't for me. Well, anyway, so I left, and I still write. I was writing sermons back then, and I like to perform, and that's what preaching is performing. And then I had my one-man show for 10 years. I just ended in 63, 12 years ago. So 2020, 2010. Yeah, that's when I stopped doing that. Anyway, that's kind of me. I mean, there's other things that have happened, obviously. I have 6 kids, 16 grandkids, 6 great-grandchildren. Only 2 of those children are my biological children, and the rest of them are my adopted family from the woman I'm presently married to, Judy. And we live here in Hamilton, and most of the kids and grandkids are in this surrounding area. Some of them are moving out because it's so hard to find a job. And thank you, Kevin Costner. He brought Yellowstone in here, and the prices on everything is just going crazy. Did you see the premiere of this season?
No, I have yet to watch it.
Well, watch it. When you see
I
it, he
need to.
gets
I know I need
elected.
to. It's been on my list.
Yeah, he gets elected governor, and he says all these things that are true, but instead of the made-up fictional things that Taylor Sheridan are writing about the people trying to build an airport in the Bitterroot Valley. They call it Paradise Valley. But instead of that, it's him and Paramount and Taylor Sheridan that are causing this problem. Prices are unbelievably high.
Yeah.
You can barely find a place to live. So young people who are going to raise a family, they can't stay here. So it's kind of funny. There he is preaching as the pretend governor of the state. And if the real governor of the state would have done that, Paramount would have never gotten in, which might have been a good idea. But I mean, it's been good. I like Costner. My wife and I were in the first 3 episodes.
Yeah.
And we had fun. I got paid $800 a week for, I guess it was, anyway, a couple of weeks. But I ended up, everything was on the cutting room floor except for 1.5 seconds. When Jamie, who is the jerk who really was fathered by somebody else and that Costner and his family raised, when he found out that his older brother was dead, I'm walking behind him for a second and a half. That's my claim to glory. My claim to glory. But
That's
Costner is a very nice man. He really is. The woman who plays the, excuse my French, bitchy daughter, who I'm talking about. I can't think of her name on the show even, but she's English, and she was in Britannia. She was actually pretty good in that. And a friend of mine helped write that script, Martha Little. She lives in LA. But she was acting very, it was hot. We were all dressed for this funeral scene, which never got shown. But everybody's in wools and wool hats, and it's sweltering hot. And every time they cut, an assistant of hers runs over with an umbrella and water for her, and she's just, all Twitter-pated and everything.
Yeah.
And so at the end of that shoot, he called all the extras over, and we all stood there, and he waited till everybody else left, and he said, "You guys act more professional than some of these people on this set." He said, "You stood there without complaining. You were cooperative. You did everything we asked." Anyway, I thought that was pretty nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I have some questions for you though. So let's go back
Okay,
to you've been writing for a really, really long time. You've had a crazy, exciting life. But I want to know, how did you get writing, Westerns? How did you fall into that? Have you always been writing Westerns since you started writing?
No. Winston Churchill said, if you're not a liberal in your 20s, you don't have a heart. And if you're not a conservative in your 60s, you don't have a brain. And I was a hippie. When I got out of Yale, and when I was at Yale, I was writing all these weird screenplays and plays and everything, hip kind of stuff. But since I was 5, and we were up here in Montana, I wanted to be a cowboy.
Right.
So when I moved up here 13 years ago, I bought horses, and I had learned to ride. It was me and my sister, but we got tennis lessons, riding lessons, golf lessons. We got all these things that most kids don't get. So I knew how to ride, but my wife and I, Judy and I, had at one time between 10 and 15 horses, and we lived up on the west side, and we had a little ranch up there. And then back to your question. There's a publishing company called Outlaw Publishing. I think it's defunct right now. But Nick was the publicist for that company too. And the guy who I was writing for, he was a retired pastor too, that Outlaw Publishing. But my language wasn't to his liking. My bad guys actually swore, and they said nasty things about women. And he was like, And I love to quote the Bible in anything because it's so applicable to everything. So he says, you can't have scripture and then all this other stuff going on. I said, have you read the Bible recently? I mean, in Psalms, it celebrates when you take your enemy's children by the heels and smash their heads against the rocks. That's in Psalms. I mean, there are just amazingly non-PC stories in the Bible, you know. So I didn't see any problem with that. And so he dropped me. He said, "Well, you're going to have to write for somebody else." And Nick came to my rescue. He said, "Dusty Saddles is run by Bennett, right? Michael Bennett? No, Ted Bennett. Bruce Bennett, I think is his name. Right? Is that right?
So,
Something like that." Anyway,
something.
he says, well, Bruce doesn't care if you've got sex in your books or not, or swear. It's okay. You can do whatever you want. So then I started 32 book series on Seth Kincaid, Texas Rangers.
Right.
And then we switched to Uzziah, who was in one of the latter Seth Kincaid books. And that was before my open heart surgery. And that became a really big hit. We just finished that series up at 26 books. And for some reason, the people don't want to read about the death of Emmanuel James Jones, Uzziah's partner. So that book hasn't caught on yet. But we had 10 books in the top 100 for a while. Yeah.
That's
Just,
impressive.
yeah, which is pretty good. And we were making some decent money. So, you know how this thing goes. It's an absolute crapshoot. At some level, everybody's writing about the same. You know what I'm saying? I
Mm,
mean, you wouldn't get your books published or be one of the authors in their stable if you weren't writing well. But what do people want to read? What do
mm.
people want to do? So I have an offshoot from the Uzziah series called Ariel's Prophet, and it's about a woman who is a virgin blood. She's related to the Virgin Mary,
Mm.
and every other woman in that lineage has the ability to travel through time. Uh, so I thought, well, that might be
That's
interesting.
interesting.
So it's actually caught on. I've only done 6 books, but we had a few they were in the top 100 for a little while. But anyway, it's all a crapshoot. It really is. You know, you
So,
just have to go ahead.
you've written a lot with DSP. I kind of want to know what your writing process is like. How much do you write a day?
If it's a good day, 5,000 words.
Okay.
But I go back and correct. What I don't do is one of my teachers at Yale said, "Do not reread what you've written until you're done,
Okay.
because it'll discourage you. You'll see that it's crap, and then you'll stop. So wait till you get through and then go back." But I don't exactly do that now. I used a typewriter for years. I mean, when I was at Yale, I had a typewriter, and
Mm-hmm.
I got stuff photocopied to turn in. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't go to computers until I was in Dallas. And my son gave me this computer. It's a
Nice.
gateway. Yeah, it's a gateway. And the laptop, my wife bought me this laptop. It's a gateway too. And so I try to get into. I'm kind of messed up now because I'm trying to write this autobiography, and it's bringing up all kinds of issues for me. Not bad issues, just issues. Um, so I'm working on Ariel 7, Chadwick's Way 4, and my autobiography. I also have another series through Ravenwood Publishing, you know, that horror publishing
Raventown.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah, Raven, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote a screenplay many years ago, 30 years ago, about this guy, Officer Tilden at the Dallas Police Department. And it was kind of wacky and And Nick kept telling me, you need to write a horror movie. You need to write a horror book. I said, okay, okay. So I took the screenplay and I turned it into a book. And all the reviews on it were like, what kind of drugs is this guy on? What in the heck? It was, anyway, I liked it. And so I wrote another one, which is, I think, better. He ends up in Jamaica and marries this Jamaican woman. And he's going back to the third book. He's going to be a police officer in New Orleans. But it's got all kinds of weird things happening, but I don't know. No weirder than. Did you read the Don Juan series, Carlos Castaneda? Come
Mm-mm.
on, you must have read that.
Mm-mm.
Really? Oh
No.
my God. What do you read?
Horror and sci-fi and fantasy.
Oh, you didn't say porn. You said horror, right?
Horror.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I was like, what?
No, I'm reading a lot of the Raventail horror right now.
Oh, well, then you should look at It's Colossal Killer with the big monster in the ocean, the red
Yeah, yeah,
monster.
yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't do it, and it doesn't have anything to do with red monsters. All about cover attracting attention. So, but Ben Teller's a pretty cool guy. He's an accident of his time. He's related to all these underlying things that are happening to him, but he doesn't know how it happens. Like a lot of us, how we get where we got. So
Um,
no, I didn't always write westerns. I've written
okay.
a lot.
You've
Written a lot.
written a lot. Is there something that you haven't written yet that you kind of want to jump into? Whether that's a different genre or like a dream project that you haven't yet stumbled into yet?
Well, my sister always told me that I should write my autobiography, and when Nick suggested it, I thought, why not? And that is kind of a dream project. But
Yeah.
do you know who Jack Kerouac is?
Yeah.
On the Road.
Yeah.
Did you read that?
No. But
Oh. Anyway, he wrote that book from a roll of paper towels in a men's room,
yeah.
and he took the towel down, and so he didn't have to change the pages. He just kept, and it
Right.
just kept rolling up. Anyway, it's kind of in that tradition. It's all over the place, but I think it's going to make sense.
Nice.
I hope it will. So that's
Well,
three projects, kind of.
nice. What would you say that you hope readers take away from reading your work?
Well, I'm a list keeper.
Oh.
Yeah. I fill these books up and throw them away.
Uh-huh.
But the first thing on my list is witness to God's holy word. So I don't believe in direct communication. What's your name again?
Erika.
Erika, I'm sorry. Erika, I can't tell you anything that's going to change your life directly.
Mm.
I can't. It's like trying to tell your children what to do. Forget about it. Socrates was a big believer in indirect communication and irony. Kierkegaard, the father of existentialism, you've heard of that, right? Existentialism. Well, Kierkegaard said you can't, it's through irony and indirect communication. That's why I wrote my thesis at Florida State University on nonverbal communication, because that's indirect. If I make signs, that's me speaking, but without saying anything, right?
Mm.
So I try to, and it sounds sneaky, but it's not really. I just slip in God's word into everything I write. And in fact, I'm writing a story right now, the fourth, Chadwick's Way, based on a real lynching in 1888 in Canyon City. And the gentleman who was lynched, they've got his picture online and everything. I mean, and all these people are just standing around, like smiling, like, yeah, we lynched him. So I'm having the new governor, Job A. Clark, I think that's his name, just got elected in Colorado through Marshal David Cook, who was the Marshal of Denver City, sending Chadwick and Will, also known as Tomahawk and Blade, down to Canyon City to get the names and all the information on these people that lynched this guy. But what they don't know is what the governor is going to do with those names is he's going to make those people in charge of a committee on protecting people's rights and assuring them that they'll get a trial. You see, it's kind of devious. Anyway, I'm going to take this guy that was lynched and make him into a kind of Christ figure. You know, what did the crowd, when Pilate, you know the story of Jesus, right? When Pilate said, who do you want, Barabbas or Jesus? They were like, give us Barabbas. We want the thief. So there's a priest down there while the lynching is happening, and he sees this parallel between what's happening to this poor man and Christ, because Christ kind of got ramrodded onto the cross. So I'm going to make it indirectly a story about an innocent person dying for other people. So that's what I hope they take away, something that slips up on them. You know, they say in the theater, they say the loudest sound in the theater is the sound of someone changing their mind. I mean, look, I don't know if you like theater. A lot of people don't. And they've been saying for years that the theater is dead.
I grew up in theater.
You did. Well, there you go. You stand on stage. You say things that aren't yours. You're repeating lines from a playwright.
Yeah.
It's all false, except for the emotion that you get between the audience and between the characters on stage. And yet, audience sitting in the dark, not realizing it, they've identified with somebody in that story. And the moment the denouement comes and something happens, it's like, oh my God.
Right.
That's indirect communication.
Yeah.
It has to. It can't be. Nobody's telling them how to feel about that, you know?
Well, it looks like I think we're down to our last 5 minutes because I don't have the pro of Zoom, but is there anything, we have about 5 minutes. So is there anything you would like to end this on to share with people that are watching?
I'm amazed that you grew up in theater. That's great.
Oh.
Theater's important. Theater's important.
Yeah.
It really is. If there's something I want them, well, if there was, I couldn't tell them directly. So they're just going to have to read my book. Hopefully.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. Okay, before you go then, what has been one of your favorite series that you've written with DSP so far of the long series? What was the one that was the most fun to write?
Uzziah, Making of a Mountain Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that 26-book series is, I cried when Emmanuel died. I mean, we created the character, but he's not real, but you know what I'm saying? It's
yeah,
like,
of course.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for sitting down to talk with me today. You are a character. I loved hearing all of your stories.
Oh, thank you, Erika. I appreciate it. Forgive me for not remembering your name.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's the same at my age.
Well, I will send you a link to this link once they edit and whatnot and put this up on YouTube. So you'll get to see it, hopefully. Well, thank you so much again, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. And I will probably talk to you again later.
I hope so.
Okay. Bye.